Mark Owen-Jones is an assistant professor of Middle East Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University, but he's also an expert on Twitter and digital disinformation. He's joining us in Doha via Skype. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. As Alexei was saying in a report there, it's taken about 3 years for Twitter to take action like this. Why do you think it's taken it so long?
Twitter have famously been very reticent to challenge Donald Trump. As was mentioned, he is Twitter's most well-known customer. His presence on Twitter is good for the platform in terms of advertising revenue. And Twitter have generally been lax in terms of approaching or tackling fake news. So it's no surprise that they've waited so long before addressing this. It does involve electoral interference, but I'm sort of concerned that the fact that they've done this now, that they've put a warning on one of his tweets, will just simply make people think that Twitter are being proactive in tackling fake news. And I think they will be reticent to actually do this again with Donald Trump.
Is there any way of holding Twitter to account and making sure that this is not just, as you say, a one-off, but actually it does set a precedent, not only, of course, for the President of the United States, but for anybody that falls under their specific rules, if you like, for doing this kind of action?
Of course. I mean, it's very difficult to hold Twitter to account. They're a private company operating in the US. Their decisions to censor content aren't, as was suggested, just a reflection of adherence to the terms and conditions. How Twitter enforce their policy is fundamentally political. We've seen this in how they suspend accounts abroad engaging in disinformation. They will be more willing to tackle accounts that have been raised by the US administration as a policy issue, which by default makes them less likely to tackle those in the US government. So there is an asymmetry in how Twitter adopt these procedures, and there is there's an inability from civil society organizations across the globe to try and hold Twitter to account. It's possible through pressure, but it's very difficult, and there's no sufficient mechanisms to actually really hold them to be more transparent about such issues.
On the basis of those same mechanisms that you've just talked about, does that mean that it's going to be difficult for the White House to do anything other than complain when Twitter does something like this?
In theory, yes, but we know that when Donald Trump complains about something, whether it's press freedom or fake news, then there often is take-up. I think Twitter now, after Donald Trump tweeted and criticized them for censoring free speech, will be very aware that there will be potential consequences for this. Who knows what those consequences are, but it's very clear that Trump is attempting to intimidate them after this has occurred.
Do you think that as users of Twitter and other social media platforms that we have become very lax in the way in taking responsibility for checking facts that are given to us, that we prefer to have things essentially just handed to us and take them as face value, and we should actually be taking more control back individually?
I think we should, as individuals, be taking more control and responsibility for what we post and repost. However, individual responsibility is not devoid of the atmosphere in which it operates. And I think in most, certainly democratic societies, or any societies, people expect a certain amount from public officials. And one of those expectations is an adherence or respect for the truth. I think in the past 3 or 4 years in this post-truth environment, especially with the likes of Donald Trump as president, we've seen officials with influence paying scant regard for the integrity or the value of truth. And I think this is having an impact on people's ability to, one, value the truth, but also to trust public officials in what they say.
Really appreciate you giving us the benefit of your expertise in this. Mark Owen-Jones, thanks very much for your time.